Hello and welcome to the Rabblecast. My name is Eric Hernandez,
I'm Doug.
and we are here to talk about the recent release of the Crow movie trailer. If you haven't listened to the show before, Doug and I are big fans of The Crow, the original comic and the original movie, which starred Brandon Lee, the late Brandon Lee. And it's been a lot of discussion as far as whether this new film will do well, fall short, however you want to look at it. We get into it a little bit now that we have a little bit more to go off of now that there's a trailer that's been released. So we give our thoughts on that one. And then from there we have a fun little discussion of other films that can be, but should they be redone, remade, revisited, or whatever the case is. Doug had brought up a few picks as far as films that he thought that might be able to work in that regard. And I brought up a couple that may or may not be good ideas, but we'll see. We will get to that one as we go a little bit further. We are brought to you by InsidePulse.com. You can find us under the variety of different sections: games, comic books, wrestling, TV, movies, celebrities. Check it out. We're there. We're also over at Rabblecast.libsyn.com, where the show is always uploaded. Go check it out so you can always make sure you don't miss an episode. Also, check us out on YouTube at Rabblecast. Check out the Rabblecast Facebook fan page, where I always post updates about when the show is released. Send us a tweet at Rabblecast because, well, it's still Twitter, damn it. And email us, rabblecast@gmail.com. Did you watch the new Crow trailer? What are your thoughts on it? Give us a heads up. Send us an email. Comments, thoughts, feedback, stories, pictures, whatever you like. They're always welcome. Anything else, sir?
Nothing for me.
Excellent. We'll let the episode speak for itself. With that, let's get into it. Enjoy the show.
Welcome back to the Rabblecast. I'm Doug.
I'm Eric. This is new.
Something different. Spice it up.
I
Mix
like
it
it.
up.
Yeah, there you go. How you doing, sir?
That's actually the intro I used for the other podcast I'm on, Wings on Wings. So yeah, but a little crossover, a little something. What the fuck? Why not? I
Hey,
don't know.
that works for me. Why not? How many episodes are left on that one? You've mentioned it a couple times. To be honest, I've never had a chance to look it up. I've been so busy with other things. But
Not a word. It's not a good podcast. It's an excuse for us to hang out. The podcast started as a fucking joke, for Christ's sakes, in the fall of 2019. So it's nothing. If you don't listen to it, you're not missing anything. Most of it is just of us complaining about how bad the show is. We are at There are I want to say 172 episodes of Wings, running from 1990 to 1997. We are. Fuck, I'm trying to remember. Okay, we're in the final season. There's 24 episodes in the final season. I think we've done 4 of them so far, so we got like 20 episodes left.
oh, good Lord. Okay. It's quite a bit of episodes to try to go through on Wings. See, it's not that I don't, Wings was a show that was so oddly placed at the time on USA Network.
Hmm.
It was sometimes Monday Night Raw would be the lead-in for it. So late night, you would catch an episode of Wings out of nowhere. Like, if you stuck around afterwards, Monday Night Raw went off the air, then an episode of Wings would start. Like, if you went to the kitchen or to the bathroom and came back, you're like, oh, Wings, look at that. And it lived that way in syndication for the longest time. It's kind of like the Westminster dog kennel show that would pop up every now and then and would take over an episode of Monday Night Raw.
Yeah, I remember that. We get like preempted, I think 3 or 4 times a year, maybe.
Yeah, and it was so annoying because every now and then you turn on TV, you're like, oh, no wrestling tonight. Oh, whatever. And you turn it off and go find something else to do. Back in the day
Yep.
when there was no streaming. Or
Or
maybe,
yeah, you just watch Nitro, and you just didn't watch Raw that night.
yeah, or if you didn't watch WCW, you didn't know of its existence at the time. You're like, oh, I guess I'm going to go outside and then let my feet touch the grass. Some weird shit like that. But no, it's to hear that you guys are still doing that podcast. It's just like, wow, a show on wings on wings. That's one. It's a catchy, gimmicky idea. I love the title, Wings on Wings.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's just like that takes dedication to sit there and go through all that.
Well, it's actually, here's the trick of it. So when we started doing the show, it was myself and 3 other people I'm pretty close friends with. As I've talked about here on in recent times and in the past, these are the people who were go to the Mahoney Drive-In a lot with. So we've all known each other for I can't even count anybody in that group for years. It's all been decades. The show, if nothing else, we'll just eat the wings and hang out, complain about how stupid the episode is, and then just spin off and just start talking about whatever. Like, we've had episodes where it's like, one episode they went to a strip club, so of course we all like stories, so we started breaking out like different that. So we're all over the place. And recently, somebody who was a big fan of the show, our friend Tatum, she joined the show too, so she's become like the 5th chair because she was this, and she kind of like she just really pushed until she was like, "You're gonna let me out." Or I couldn't make a few episodes. They brought her in as like to sit in for me, and then after a while, we're like, "Fuck it, we're already a 4-piece person. 4 people is way too much for a podcast, so why not just make it 5? Who cares? Everything's crazy. Whatever. Who gives a shit?" So yeah, and I mean, like, the podcast is controlled chaos. We're breaking the biggest rule because we're eating wings on the show, which is a very noisy food to eat on a goddamn podcast.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's already a mess of a concept. So at this point, it's like, fuck it, might as well. We have some stuff lined up for the future. I don't want to say on here, not that there's really any crossover, but I don't want to give anything away because we got some stuff planned out for for the end of the run once we get there. So, but it's actually been kind of fun. And I was thinking about it the other day. It's wild to think about because we started recording in right around the end of January in 2020. We recorded like 8 or 9 episodes over January and February, and then we had to put the podcast on hold when the pandemic lockdowns hit because there's no way we could do that remotely. We all have to be in the same room, and there's 4 of us. So we're like, we'll just table this for now. And we didn't record again for just about a year until March of 2021. Once we all got, we were all either vaccinated or partially vaccinated. So we should have been done already, but unfortunately, it's just, nobody was expecting the fucking pandemic. So
yeah, nobody was.
But, yeah, it's been one of those things where it's been oddly fun, actually. But I mean, the show it's interesting to watch. People talk about like shows like The Wire and Breaking Bad and Sopranos. They gave a shot in the arm to television and television writing and made it be better. So going back and watching a sitcom from, I think it was on CBS back in the 90s, it's clearly not written for young people. Like, this show is so fucking milquetoast that watching it, we're just all sitting there like, there have been times we all just looked at each other. It's like, is this what people found funny, 25, 30 years ago? Because this fucking sucks. So
yeah, it's a bit of a time capsule when it comes to TV that way.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So no, but like, I'm sitting here, and anytime you mention it, I try to think of any other show that you could try to make along those lines. And the first thing that comes to my mind is when they used to have those dinner and a movie commercials during Nitro.
Oh yeah, on TNT.
Yeah, and they'd say, "Oh, we're gonna make Macho Man tacos," and whatever the case. Like, they'd come up with like some silly name to try to like tie it into whatever the lead-in was. In this case, wrestling. And sometimes they would have special guest wrestlers, and it would be fun and silly. And the theme song that would play during the commercials it was just catchy, a little bit of an earworm. And it's like, okay, this is fun, this is silly. Don't know how long this is going to last, but I can't think of any other show off the top of my head. Maybe just because I'm lacking, improv skill right now, to think of something else that you can do that would be like the name Wings on Wings.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds so simple, but it's like, why didn't somebody else think about this?
Because who the fuck wants to review a fucking shitty sitcom from the fucking 90s?
Well, besides that it's a shitty sitcom, what I'm saying is just the fact like Wings on Wings is such the name has simplicity built into it.
Uh-huh.
That like that alone, if it doesn't hook somebody enough to like, oh, let me check this out and see what's going on, you didn't have to enjoy the show. You're just listening to a bunch of people like talk about it while they're eating. So it's just like the only thing I can think of right now off the top of my head is like the Wire on wine. You know, for the alliteration. Just get drunk while watching episodes of The Wire.
Oh, we've got tons of terrible spin-off ideas.
Oh
The
boy.
biggest one we've joked about Chips on Chips. Bloody hell, no, I can't remember it, but we've had at least like 4 or 5 ideas of like, oh, okay, we can. The alliteration, Nachos on Night Court was one that was pitched. That got shot down rather quickly.
Okay.
Yeah, there were a couple other ones like that. Oh, actually, one of my favorites was actually. I'll give this to you. One time we did about a month and a half ago, we did a sauce that was Kiss themed.
Ooh.
Which of course led to everybody at the table doing their Paul Stanley Kiss live impressions, where he starts screaming about alcohol and gin and stuff like that. And somebody came up with the idea of, it's like, why isn't there a Kiss podcast called Kiss and Tell? And we're all just stopped like, holy shit, that's a great title.
That was actually the name of a book. I know because I read it.
Kiss and Tell?
Yes.
Was it like a story? Was it like a bio deal about Kiss?
I do believe it was pretty much like the behind the scenes, like all the business workings of the band. It was funny because at one point they're talking with their business manager and they're going back and forth because the band was hemorrhaging money. And as they're talking to one of the business managers, at one point they have them in a room and Gene and Paul both are talking to the guy and like whatever, like manager or financial manager. And even though they're explaining to them, oh, you know, we created all these different tax shelters for you guys. This is where your money went here. Your money went here for touring. Your money went here for costumes. Your money went here for makeup and hair products and all this stuff. Paul Stanley repeatedly at different points throughout the conversation goes, okay. And then he points at the piece of paper on the table and goes, but I'm worth this much money is what you're telling me. Like reiterating that you guys told me that I have this much money, but now you're telling me I don't have this much money. So where the fuck did that money go? And the whole reason it was being recorded because they were trying to like build a case just in case these lawyers or business managers were trying to like to finagle some money here and there. But over and over again, like for as much as everybody says that Gene Simmons is a sellout and he'll put the Kiss logo on just about everything and you know, Kiss coffins, Kiss condoms, Kiss wine, you name it, it probably has the Kiss logo or brand on it and has been sold. But he's one smart motherfucker that he always finds a way to sell something. And because of that, sure, he'll talk about the band all the live long day. But he knows at the end of the day that he's selling the band. He's selling the image. He's selling the name over and over and over again. And it's worked. I mean, just now they so they've officially retired the band itself. That's Gene, Paul, Eric Singer, and Tommy Thayer. Eric Singer and Tommy Thayer replacing some of the more original members and then later members who came along. If you look through the history of Kiss, there's been different drummers and different guitarists, whatever the case is. Gene and Paul have always been the contest. What's that?
Vinnie Vincent.
How the fuck do you know that name?
I forgot. Somebody mentioned something about Vinnie Vincent and years ago, and I looked at him. I was like, "Who's Vinnie Vincent?" And they're like, "Oh, he was one of the guys who he replaced. Was it Ace Frehley? I think."
Correct. Yes, he was the Unk Warrior because his makeup idea was he just drew an unk on his face like in gold or metallic paint, and then he had the white outline around it and everything else. Vinny was a really, really good guitar player, and he's still around, actually. In fact, Ace Frehley and him have been posing in a lot of pictures on social media for some reason. But that was Gene Simmons just trying to make sure that the band name and everything was out there. But with them finally retiring, just immediately as they announced their retirement, they announced, oh, Kiss is coming back, but in a different way. they're going to make 3D avatars of themselves and do a virtual concert. So they've done motion capture. They have the 3D models already built. They look okay. They look like the, you know, more recent versions of themselves. I think they could have been done a little bit better. Maybe like de-aged them a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But they worked with Industrial Light and Magic, the same people who did the effects for Star Wars and many other films at this point. And they created a realm for KISS to exist in so they can do virtual concerts. And they are announcing they're going to be doing a virtual show, which people can buy tickets for and buy streaming for. And they're going to continue the band that way.
Huh.
And I was like, I don't know how I feel about this. The way everything's going right now with video games and VR and augmented reality, I'm like, it sounds like it could be a good idea, but the problem is you guys have aged already. So when you sing, when you do your movements, it's all, I hate to say it, you guys are old.
Yeah, they all got to be in their...
I want to say, yeah, they're probably at least in their 60s or 70s at this point.
Yeah.
I don't know about Tommy and Eric Singer. They're a little bit younger, but even them, they'd be like in their 50s somewhere.
Yeah, it's getting a little ridiculous.
Yeah, so but again, if this is what you've been doing all your life and this is what you know and what you love and you want to hang on to it, what's the next step? Because I remember back in the 90s reading old magazines from the 80s, because I was that much of a fan. I would steal my brother's old rock magazines and read up on the articles on KISS. And they asked him, like, what are you guys going to do when you guys, you know, hang up the makeup and hang up the boots and all that, like the platform shoes? You can only do that for so long. Will there be a KISS 2? So would they recruit other musicians to further the legacy? And that was talked about at one point where they're like, oh yeah, no, we'll find a way. The band will live on without us. We just got to figure out how that's going to work. Well, 3D avatars, they can live forever.
So you know, want to know what though?
What's that?
This is no different than. So I'm reminded of back in 1998. I saw an interview with Gwar out of makeup, which was wild because I'd never seen them out of makeup at the time, and I was initially taken back at, wow, they just look like normal fucking people.
Yeah.
But it was funny because Dave Rocky even was sitting there and even said, it was like, you know, it could be anyone in these costumes. So theoretically, Gwar can go on forever. And he kind of unfortunately proved it right, you know, back in 2014 when he died, because he was the last original member left of Gwar. So there are no, at best you have like second generation guys in the band, but like, yeah, there are no originals left. So it's not too dissimilar from that. I mean, hell, even if you get somebody with the right hair and makeup and slap the paint on them and get the gear, I mean, you can have somebody else you can hire somebody else to be, you know, the KISS demon or whatever. I'm sure Dale Torberg keeps a guy out to play guitar and throw him the fuck on stage. Or bass, I should say.
I was waiting for that reference.
Same thing with the Starman and all the other crap. So why not?
Absolutely. I mean, there is the little KISS. What's the proper term for little people these days?
I think they're called mini KISS.
Yes. So they're smaller in stature, but they still dress up in the costumes and they're quite popular. They've popped up on TV shows, special appearances. They do their own little concerts. No pun intended. And they get out there. So people are like, oh, I love KISS. Oh, little KISS and everything else like that. There's a bunch of tribute bands out there that do the makeup and get on stage. There's one in particular called I think Mr. Speed Demon or something like that. It's a tribute off of one of the old KISS songs from the 70s. They're out there. One of the ones that I remember that kind of, you know, makes this whole thing ring true, and it's possible. Damn, somebody with a loud-ass car. One of the things I remember growing up and seeing when I would go to 7-Eleven back in the day, and I used to love going to 7-Eleven in Somerville all the time because as soon as you walk in, immediately to your right, they had the magazine racks.
Yeah.
And you could just walk by and just peruse and look at all the different covers. And I would every now and then pick up one of the music magazines. And on the back, there was an advertisement for Gene Simmons' Punisher bass. And it the bass guitar was shaped in the style of the Punisher skull. But when you'd hold it upside down, it almost like a Punisher skull, like almost like in a spade formation. It was a really nicely done guitar. They had that and his axe bass. And one of the advertisements was it was Gene Simmons without makeup, standing face to face, toe to toe, nose to nose with Gene Simmons in makeup. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool.
Oh wow!
They probably took two different shots, superimposed. No, one of the musicians that they knew was similar height and stature to Gene Simmons, to which they said, let's put you in the Kiss makeup and see how this looks. So Gene Simmons had a lookalike. He had a body double, essentially. And the advertisement was just awesome because it's both of them hanging on like to the neck of the bass, and they're both like staring each other down. And the guy in makeup was, tongue hanging out, very similar to Gene Simmons, had similar length for his tongue and everything else. And other Gene Simmons there, I don't remember if he had facial hair or not, but, mimicking the same stance and stare. And I was just like, oh, this is kind of fucking cool. Yeah, Kiss could go on if you had other musicians who were talented enough that could pull it off. If they had the same sound, maybe not quite the same style because you want to progress a little bit. But yeah, that was something that was tossed around for quite a bit. But now they opt for 3D versions. So, you okay? You're going in and out a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on over here. I'm not doing anything different, so I don't know what the fuck's going on.
Damio, are you moving around a lot or no?
No, I'm just sitting talking to you, man.
Oh, weird. Okay. All right, we'll see what we can muster later down the line. Switching gears a little bit, I wanted to ask you, I know we talked about this already, and it's probably something we're going to touch upon in the coming months as we get closer to the release. The new Crow movie. We talked about the first images that were released, and we got to see Skarsgård in his Jared Leto-esque Joker look.
Mm-hmm.
Today, they released the first trailer. Have you seen that by chance?
Yeah. I just watched it about 20.
And what did you think about it?
You know what? I liked it. So far, like, I'm not sold on... I really am not sure about this tattoos on them. Those kind of look kind of silly. But I like the fact they just kind of played it like a normal guy when they showed him earlier in the trailer. So it was one of those situations where I was like, okay, it's not bad. And Skarsgård's pretty solid actor. There were a couple of shots that I saw that I was like, oh, I really like that. So if nothing else, even if we just get like a movie that's really stylized and aesthetically pleasing, you know what? I think I can party with that. So what did you think?
Yeah, same as you. The tattoos are still a little off-putting in certain respect, but once we saw him in motion and once we saw the actual story beats for the trailer, I was a little bit more on board. Granted, not to say I'm not. I'm very much looking forward to it because, again, I want this to do well. I want James Olbar to have a big payday. But there are a few things that I like. One thing in particular I like is when he walks around and like his head's down and you get just to see his eyes peering out from underneath his brow, and he's wearing the leather jacket. I'm like, oh, that's very reminiscent of the comic book. That look with no shirt and just a trench coat.
Yes.
I was like, okay, this could definitely work. Immediately after I saw the trailer, and I like it. It's a very brutal trailer, and as it should be for the story it's telling. Skarsgård and AKA Twiggy are the only
FKA Twiggy.
FKA. Thank you.
Jesus, you sound older than me.
Formerly known as. God damn it! Where's my Metamucil? Those two actors so far are the only ones that are listed with their names on IMDb.
Okay.
Because I immediately went online to see who Danny Houston was playing.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have him listed as far as who his character is. I don't think he's Top Dollar, or at the very least, he's a different version of Top Dollar altogether. But I don't see any names listing for like Fun Boy or the rest of the gang. I don't see Gideon listed in the credits yet. The other actors are up there. You can see who's involved in the film, but a lot of the different names of those characters have not been revealed yet as to who's playing who.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, they're trying to like keep it quiet for the time being. This has already been established. We do know that it's Eric and Shelley again, different versions altogether, but at the very least, we have a foundation to build off of. Now, the other thing that's been talked about quite a bit online, and mind you, this is released today, so in less than 24 hours, this has already sparked some debates online among fans, and that is how Eric and Shelley die.
Uh-huh.
So, in the comic book, it's a random act of violence. Shelley and Eric are on they're trying to get out to the countryside to get away from the city for a little bit. Their car breaks down on the side of the road. They run across T-Bird and his gang. Shit goes down, and that starts, the legacy of the Crow as far as Eric Draven is concerned. In the movie, they live in this rundown apartment, which they're trying to tear down because they're going to try to gentrify the neighborhood. And when they in particular don't want to move out, T-Bird is dispatched along with the rest of his gang by Top Dollar to force them to move out. So the idea was, depending how you look at it all together, it's either they're trying to get them to sign the papers to say, oh, we're going to move, we agree to get out of here. When Shelley doesn't sign the papers, that's when they move to beat and assault her. And then at that point, once they're having their quote unquote, jollies, fucking delinquent gang they are, that's when Eric comes home, finds them, and then they just say, fuck this, we're going to kill them. And they move on from there. Like whether they were going to kill them, yes or no, that's, a moot point. It all becomes like a snowball effect down to Eric gets beaten, shot, thrown out the window. Shelley gets defiled, or whatever you want to refer to it as. She just gets abused. And then they leave her for dead as well. She dies later on the operating table in the emergency room. And that was how that began in the movie. So far in this one, it looks like Shelley refers to witnessing some events that a gang did, so that she knows some knowledge of what the gang has done. And because of that, they're both in danger, and then they both get bags put over their heads as they're being beaten by the gang. Yeah. And they essentially get to watch one another pass away in front of each other's eyes. Like, that scene alone of the trailer, I was like, holy shit. But what I liked from the trailer was there's that image of Shelley sinking into the water, and Eric's trying to reach out for her. And the idea is, oh, he's been brought back, given this power. I don't like that they say you've been given the power of a god. I'm like, that's a little too on the nose.
Yeah, that was a little much. Like, let it.
So from there, I was just like, But the idea that, okay, you have time to quote unquote save her. In other words, from eternal damnation, I'm guessing, because she's just sinking further and further into this water. And the idea is that if he puts the wrong things right, then hopefully he can be with her together again. And then he'll save her from whatever sinking she's doing. And then in the afterlife, they can reunite along those lines, whatever the case is. I don't know how it's going to play out. They're playing a little loose with the rules as far as that's concerned. I don't know who that individual was that's talking to him when he falls backwards into the water and he realizes he has this ability now and all the crows are circling around his head. From there, I'm assuming it's a different character. I don't think it's the Skull Cowboy from the comics or from the deleted scenes from the first movie. So how that's going to play out, I'm not entirely sure. It looks like there's other businessmen involved, very similar to how Top Dollar had all his generals or his captains. But they seem to be on a larger scale than just, running around Detroit City. So I don't know. It's give or take, but the action, the fighting, the gunplay, when he first realizes that he takes that shotgun blast to the chest and he gets right up from it and looks down and goes, oh shit. And then he retaliates. I was like, okay, this has promise, this has potential. But the question that has been asked quite a bit is, does it have to be Eric and Shelley? Could they have gotten away with saying, hey, This is another couple that had some horrible shit happen to them. And this is the story of how the crow, the power of the crow, brings this individual back to save his loved one, in a sense. One of the things I did find on IMDb today was that with the constant on and off of the different people who were involved in the film, so was it Luke Owen, Jason Momoa, Bradley Cooper, all these different people who were at one point tapped to play Eric Draven and fell out either due to disagreements or scheduling conflicts. At one point, this was going to be, before all this was involved, this was going to be a female crow.
Okay.
But they dropped that idea and just said, we're just going to stick to the Eric Draven character and go from there. Don't know why. I don't know if we're ever going to get that female version portrayed. I think it'd be great to see, especially since that character exists in one of the spin-off comics. But with the method of how the characters are dispatched, people are saying that, oh, in the comic books, it was a random act of violence. Very much like how James Obar's love interest in real life was taken out by, a car crash. It was random. It was one of those things that made him question life, question, religion. Like, how could God make something so beautiful and take it away and destroy it utterly? So the movies having to be evicted from the apartment, or in this case now, Shelley witnessing something that, some gang murders and being taken out as a loose end, those don't seem as random. Those more seem targeted, and it's not really on point for what the story is. That's more screenwriting, script writing, and the movie studio saying, well, there has to be a reason. They can't just be random. The audience won't buy that. So unfortunately, that's just, producers and writers and thinking that they know better and have to convey that point to the audience rather than just say, hey, wrong place, wrong time, shit goes down. This is what this supernatural story starts as. And then from there, we're along for the ride. But I don't know. Again, I'm optimistic. I want it to do well. Right out the gate, I can say that over and over again. But the initial images that we saw were kind of a letdown, only because everybody's like, oh, Jared Leto Joker. This looks like the Suicide Squad all over again. Just now that he's wearing all black instead of purple. Now watching some of the scenes so far, the trailer is like, what, a minute and change?
Yeah, about that. I think a minute 30 to like a minute 50.
Yeah, so hats off to whoever cut that trailer, whichever studio or, editing department took care of that. Because they did a good job. I mean, at this point, people are talking about it in a better light. There's going to be the naysayers who say, oh, you should never touch the Eric Draven story. In fact, Alex Proyas, the original director of the first film, has been very, very vocal and has tried to stop this film from being made, saying, let's not touch Brandon Lee's legacy. Let's just leave it alone. Why do we have to fuck with this at this point? And he says that from a friend standpoint. And Obar had a very similar sentiment where, he made friends with Brandon Lee on the set. And they got along really, really well. So for him to see this, constantly be saying, oh, we're going to do a remake, we're going to be doing a reboot, we're going to do the Eric Draven character again. I'm sure he has mixed emotions about the whole thing because everyone's just talking money. Oh, this will be big, this will be huge, we'll get this guy, we'll get that girl. I'm sure Obar isn't going to cough at the money or sneeze at the money, whatever you're saying you want to use in that phrase.
He'll cash that check.
Exactly. For somebody like him, I'm sure it'll be something that's welcomed with mixed emotions. It's probably not exactly how he wants it to go, but he's not gonna be like an Alan Moore who just says, fuck Hollywood, I'm done with you. That kind of thing. Because apparently Alan Moore, for anybody who doesn't know, who wrote The Watchmen, which eventually got turned into a big Hollywood blockbuster by Zack Snyder, they sent him checks for the movie. Said, here are your royalties, here's your cut. And the rumor is he never cashed those checks.
Really? Interesting.
So he was like, I guess you want to say he's a purist, or he just, a curmudgeon who just doesn't want to have anything to do with Hollywood. Because they essentially just took his work and, adapted it to the big screen, and it's not exactly how we wanted it to go, but sometimes you don't have a say in that line of work, especially when you're working for a comic book company and you create something for them. It's not yours. Your name is attached to it, but eventually those movie rights get sold off without your say so, and then your name's on the big screen, written by, or based on the comics written by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons. And you're just like, oh, okay, well, hey, look, I would love for somebody to send me a few $100,000 just for something I decided to write and get away with.
Or you're just a crazy person who lives in a cave and has a giant wizard beard, and I don't know. And wasn't he also pissed off about V for Vendetta like about 4 years before Watchmen?
Exactly. Yeah. Just anything of his that gets adapted, he's not in for that. So I don't know what his exact complaint or cause or reason is. I'm sure you can go online and find all different fan theories and ideas. It's funny because not long ago, I think it was during the pandemic, I saw he was doing like master classes where he will teach you how to write and do all this other stuff. And it was him sitting there in front of the camera again with the big wizard beard and everything else. He's a master for storyteller. So I think if there's two guys I would love to sit down and have conversations with as far as writing and storytelling, it would be him and Neil Gaiman. I think you could learn a lot from those guys. And Neil Gaiman's been very open about how he does it, his process and everything else. But to see that Alan Moore was also doing those master classes, I'm like, oh, that's fucking awesome. Like that's a good way to learn from him, even though he's pretty much been like antisocial and just doesn't want to deal with that nonsense. He's not a guy that you're going to find at the conventions and everything else. He'd rather just keep to himself. So if that's the case, cool. On the other hand, you have guys like Frank Miller who show up to conventions, but they like to talk to the fans, like to get involved a little bit. There's the one story I remember of, I don't remember which convention it was, but he had a long line at his table. People were bringing books for him to sign and everything else. And somebody brought him this beat up copy of The Dark Knight Returns, the graphic novel. Corners are bent, pages are practically falling out of the damn thing. And he stopped, picked it up, and looked at everybody in the line. He goes, everybody, just want to let you know, I'm paraphrasing here, this is a comic book. Like, this is somebody who's read this, loved this, is taking it with them on journeys, whatever the case was, and just referring to, like, you guys keep bringing me all these pristine, perfect copies, blah. This one's been read through. This one's been enjoyed thoroughly. I would love to sign this copy. Because everybody has to have, a mint in bag or a bag and board, whatever the case is. It can't be touched. I'm going to have it signed. It's going to just sit on my shelf forever. Okay, that's a collector, whatever the case is. But for somebody who enjoys the story, for somebody who wants, just to say, I love what you've done. I read your stuff all the time. I enjoy it, once a year or once whenever I have a chance to sit down and relax, along those lines. So, there's different schools of thought in that as far as how you maintain a collection. Do you keep it perfectly pristine, or do you actually, take them out of the box and play with them, so to speak? So, I don't know. Either way, this July is when the movie comes out, right? For The Crow?
Either June or July. I can't remember which.
I want to say it was July last I read. But yeah, you're right. It could switch up at this point, depending on how the summer schedule is going. What was it? The other thing I read. So they wanted it to be a female Crow initially at one point in the script writing for the movie, but then there was also a bunch of news saying that the movie was supposed to come out on the 25th anniversary, but with all the starting and stopping and everything else, they could not keep the film on track for that milestone. But now here we are with the 30th, and they're going to overshoot it a little bit, but it's coming out the same year that the original film came out 30 years ago. So they're going to have that working towards that. The one thing I was surprised, I don't know if we ever talked about this. It kind of like slipped past. I really didn't read much about it. Edward Pressman, the producer on the original film and the subsequent films, passed away back in January.
Really? I did not know that.
Yeah, I didn't realize it either. I was like, holy shit. Like, this guy, once he grabbed a hold of this, IP, didn't let it go. I mean, that's why you have City of Angels, Salvation, Wicked Prayer, Stairway to Heaven, the TV show, and all the other things that are involved with it. Pressman like held on to it for so long that I didn't think anybody else was going to get their hands on it. And apparently he still had his hands on this version because it is the last film he's producing.
Mm-hmm.
So under his company, his name is still on it, but it's just like, wow, who's going to take it over from here? I don't know if his company retains it or if, whoever's next in line who runs the company is going to, just inherit the rights from there. It's going to be interesting to see. It was back in January 17th of was it this year? I want to say it was this year or last year. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I was trying to find out the cause and they didn't list anything. So they just said they found his body in his office. So that's, I don't know if he was a hardworking individual. I mean, I would imagine if you're in this kind of business, it's night and day and, burning the midnight oil kind of thing, but who knows? So yeah, it's something to look forward to at the very least, to see how it's going to play out. The music for this one, very different. And again, this is, changing with the time. So I'm curious to see how the soundtrack's going to come together for this one.
Yeah, that's going to be a big point. I don't know if we can take anything from the trailer because I definitely picked out an old Ozzy song. I can't tell you which one though because I'm not that big of an Ozzy fan.
Okay.
And then later on in it, I remember in one shot they were playing. I couldn't tell you anything because I don't know. My knowledge of rap music pretty much dies after about 2002. But it was some dude rapping and there was some auto tuning involved and. So I was like, all right, I mean, we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it shakes out and, we'll check it out and we'll see what happens. Yeah, I don't think they're going to come anywhere near the first one, but hey, stranger things have happened.
That's very true. Secretly, I was hoping that they were going to tap Trent Reznor and his collaborating buddy and have them do the score and like the composition for it all because Reznor has become very prolific so far in Hollywood on doing a bunch of different movies. If you watch, what was it? The Social Network, the Facebook movie, the score for it is really well done. And it was only until after I saw the film that I realized, oh, it's Trent Reznor and his friend who did the score for it. I was like, oh, this is really fucking good. Like I could watch this over and over again just based on that alone. Because the atmosphere that they create with their music and their score just worked really, really well. So I was kind of hoping that we're going to have something along those lines because Reznor did contribute to the original soundtrack with Dead Souls.
Yeah.
So who knows? Maybe he might be attached because, again, this is the trailer. So the trailer just is trying to sell the action with whatever music they have licensed. But I want to see who ultimately gets put onto the soundtrack and how that's going to play out. And if there's any returning acts from back in the day. I would love to hear another Henry Rollins rendition of Ghost Rider. I don't think that's going to happen.
I think Henry Rollins is officially retired from making music, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I'm sure you can convince him to probably get back in the studio and do something. But yeah, overall, I don't see him going out there and just, yelling his lungs out.
I was going to say, truth be told, thinking about it now, most of the bands that were on the first soundtrack don't exist anymore now that I'm thinking about it.
Which is kind of scary in a way to think about that. Like that much time has passed. I know we're saying 30 years, but that's a chunk of time. I mean,
the Cure is still playing. Cure still plays out on occasion, although you can tell they're getting up there. Machines of Loving Grace, I haven't heard anything about them in forever. I don't even know if they're still around. Stone Temple Pilots is obviously gone since it's been about 7 or 8 years since Scott Weiland's passing from a drug overdose. 9 Inch Nails is pretty much defunct, although earlier this week was the 30th anniversary of the release of The Downward Spiral.
Yes.
And Trent Reznor actually put something out on social media talking about it where he said he said something strange about like this was like revisiting an old friend and it was kind of bittersweet, and he kind of hinted at possibly doing another round of shows, which will be interesting because Reznor is Okay, Doug, let's see if I could do some math in my head.
Oh no.
75, 85, 90, 2005, 2015. Trent Reznor will be 59 this year.
Oh my god.
Here's a useless fun fact for you.
Yes, what's that?
Two guys who are the same age, only separated by, I think, about 2 months. Trent Reznor and The Undertaker.
What the fuck, really?
Yeah, isn't that weird? Yeah. Undertaker was, I think, February of March of 1965, and Reznor, I want to say, was April or May of 1965.
That's such a weird little trivia fact.
I looked it up one day because I saw something about their ages, and I was like, that can't be right. And I looked it up, and I was like, well, son of a bitch, they're almost the same age, almost exactly the same age.
Well, look, when you hail from Death Valley, it's going to age you a little bit, looks wise.
But so yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Yeah, he's gone. Violet Femmes, I don't know what the hell. The last I know they were still playing some shows pre-pandemic, but that was already like 5 years ago. Helmet's gone. Helmet's long gone. My Life with the Thrill Kill Cult. They were playing shows, I think, within the last decade, but I don't think they're active anymore.
I think I want to say they were promoting a show recently. Thrill Kill Cult.
Really?
Yeah. Not that long ago. Within I want to say within the past 2-3 years, maybe. So, I gotta look that one up again. Who else was on there? Rage Against the Machine.
Yeah, where I think they just finished up their second run because they were touring last year.
Yep.
I'm trying to think who else is too. For Love Not Lisa, I could not tell you anything about them at all. Medicine, I can't tell you very much about them either.
Yeah,
and that was
weird.
Yeah, it's wild thinking about all of this and thinking about the passage of time. But I mean, I'm still at that point in my life where I want to say it's like, oh, 30 years ago, why would I remember that? I was 4 years old. But it's like, no, 30 years ago, I was 14 going on 15. So that's how it is in this world.
It's so weird. I saw something online where somebody was saying that, the original one doesn't hold up. I'm like, fuck you. And then I watched that recently because I bought the Blu-ray copy.
I mean, they look rough, but I mean, they were working with the tech they had at the time.
Yeah. I mean, it's, if you're going to try to, compare and contrast to what's going on nowadays, yeah, obviously it's got a dated look, but they just made it look like it was almost like purgatory in a sense by being in Detroit in that movie. Like you were trapped in the city during Devil's Night. There was no real escape. So I'm sure they're going to open up a little bit more, and the scenes that you see in the trailer, there's daylight. They have a variety of different settings. So maybe it's going to be a little bit more open world in that respect. But the original one did give you like that sense of claustrophobia, just being in that city over and over again. And I think we had gone back and forth through text or chat that there's going to be a 4K version of the movie being released later this summer as part of the anniversary of the film, which I believe again, Alex Proyas, the original director, said he did not want to be involved with it because for him it's just trudging up a lot of old feelings that he's not prepared to go back to. So he's like, I did not have a hand in this, but this does look like a very nice project that was put together, and hopefully, for the fans, they enjoy it. So I like the fact that he's willing to say, hey, look, I have my feelings on the whole thing, and I don't think this should be going forward as far as the new film is concerned. But he's not about to deny the fans what they truly want. So if that's the case, at the very least, he has that sentimentality. But, for him, for Obar, and for a lot of the other people who worked on the film back then, they have mixed feelings on the whole thing. I do believe the actress who played young Sarah in the first film says she didn't like the initial images. She was very much similar to what everybody else was saying. It goes, it doesn't seem to fit the idea of what the original story was. So, but again, we'll have to wait a few more months. And I'm sure there's going to be more trailers released, at least 2 to 3 more, and like the final trailer, whatever the case is, and maybe we'll have a better idea. I just want to see his slow descent into madness, because that's one of the things that I thought was caught really well with Brandon Lee in the first one was whenever they do the flashback scenes and you see him and Shelley getting along together or going out for like a date night, whatever the case was, it was just a nice, romantic, normal couple, young kids in love kind of thing. But then when he was playing, the character back from the dead and then realizing, oh, I can heal. Oh, like I've got this, supernatural ability, and whatever the case was, the way he became unhinged and just said, fuck it, I can do whatever I want. You guys can't touch me. I want to see how Skarsgård is going to play with that. And go from, even keel to, fuck, you took the love of my life. I'm going to kill you all. So that's where I think a lot of the film is going to live and breathe, because you need to have the sense that this guy's lost control. Like his life has been torn apart. Now he just wants to get revenge. And see what happens. And I really want to fucking know who Danny Houston's playing.
Yeah, I'm very curious about that, and I was pleasantly surprised when I saw him pop up in the trailer, because he's very good. He's good at stuff, so we'll see what he brings to the table.
Look,
but and one thing, just to kind of circle back on something that I liked, I appreciated the fact that it doesn't look like they're not skimping on the violence for this one. It's supposed to be a ugly. This part of the story is violence is part of it, and just that sequence where he eats the shotgun load to the chest, he gets up, he fights the guy off, takes the shotgun back from him, and takes his fucking head off. I was like, whoa, holy shit. And actually, so far, the one shot that I really liked was that very stylized shot where he's climbing that grand staircase with he's got the samurai sword and the leather coat on,
yes,
the trench coat. And he's just eating round after round from all these people who are just emptying mags into the guy. And he just keeps on walking until he gets to the top and he kind of goes down, but it looks like he's playing possum. Oh, man. Yeah, that I was kind of feeling. So just wanted to kind of pop back to that because that just popped in my head again.
No, absolutely. Because there's the 2 other scenes they show in that same shot, in that same sequence, where the one guy is like on his back and he doesn't bother trying to reach around to grab the guy or fight, whatever the case is. He just points the gun in his own chest, shoots through his own body to get the guy behind him.
Oh, I forgot about that one. Yeah, that was really good.
Yeah, and then there's the other shot of him laying down, I guess after he's been like either shot or taken down briefly. But he pulls the sword out of his chest. I guess he got somebody behind him, or maybe his sword was turned on him. But either way, he's pulling it out of his chest, and as he pulls it out, he immediately starts to attack. I'm like, oh man, that just looks brutal. So yeah, those scenes I think went a long way to win over some of the old fans who were like, oh, this one's not going to be like the original one. It might be a little, the one phrase everybody loves to use nowadays when they don't like something. Oh, it's going to be fucking woke. No, it's got the brutality. It's got the love story between the 2 characters. Whatever else surrounds it at this point, how they're going to rebuild the mythology based on this story, now that remains to be seen. The thing is, these kind of movies are one and dones. There is no sequel. for as much as the studio wants there to be, there can be a franchise, but you have to be very careful on how you manage it. So the story of Eric and Shelley is beloved. Like that from the first film, from the comic book, that in of itself is a part. This one has a long way to go to try to, stand on its own 2 feet. I'm not going to say it needs to live up to the older ones, because that's already doing it disservice. That's a huge, hill to climb. This one needs to stand on its own. It needs to differentiate itself enough that we can say, okay, there's the comic, there's the first film with Brandon Lee, and this one with Skarsgård and Twiggy, that it can actually work. From there, if they want, they have a variety of different stories they can tell, but they can't skate on what this one builds and what this one's going to leave behind. So, look, that was one of the things that was very heartbreaking for me learning early on when I was growing up, is that if you make something in Hollywood, if it's not franchisable or if it's not able to be sequelized, a lot of studios don't want to deal with it. They'll take a shot on new IP, but they want it to be able to have constant returns, and let's face it. There's a reason why the term diminishing returns exists. When you try to make sequels, things eventually just they don't live up to the expectations of the original. See Jaws or Star Wars, any other film that has been given multiple sequels to it just to try to say, hey, let's bank on this. So I really hope the studio is not going to abuse this one like they did the past ones. This might be a new starting point for the franchise. And I say franchise only because now it can be like an anthology of different couples, different scenarios, different ideas of how this all plays out. Because again, City of Angels is a father-son story, which I'm sure if I see it nowadays would hit me very differently. Only because now I have kids of my own. Salvation was another, boy and girl couple. Same thing with Wicked Prayer. And then from there, I mean, nowadays you can do a lot of stuff, and doesn't have to be woke. Fuck you if that's your first go-to for any kind of, naysaying. But they can be smart about it. They can get good writers and tell a very artful story while still having that brutality in it. So the brutality in this case is very artful in of itself. Because like you said, taking that shotgun blast, getting back up, retaliating, getting the shotgun, and then taking the guy's head off, you're like, oh shit.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Yeah.
It's on point for what this story has been in the past. So why not go that route? Why not take it to that level? It's storytelling. Like, the idea is, what would you do if you and the one that you loved were killed? Taken down early in your lives and early in your relationship. Like, everybody says, happily ever after. Well, this fucking world doesn't really subscribe to that idea. So if you are killed, you're taken out, and you are granted the ability to come back and put that wrong thing right, how would you go about it? How vengeful would you be? How brutal would you be if you could hunt down those who hurt you and your loved one? With that open-ended question, that's the old interview that Brandon Lee did back in the day in the on the DVD or the VHS, like back in the day when he's giving that interview. Like, how many more sunsets will you see? How many more full moons will you be able to witness? It all seems limitless until it's not. So
yeah,
with that in mind, the brutality, it's going to be there. So I don't want to hear anybody complaining. I'm sure there will be, but
it doesn't matter. You can, dude, in this day and age, you could hand somebody $1 million and somebody would find something to complain about. I include myself into that statement. So it is what it is.
Well, look, we're big fans of the original. We're big fans of Omar himself. So with that alone, like, we're going to be, critical of what comes next, because we've heard the man talk himself at conventions, how he feels about the project, how he feels about the property, how he feels about the character. This was the idea of him being able to work through his pain in his life when somebody he loved was taken down. And it wasn't a gang. It wasn't, some horrible natural disaster. It was a car accident. Like, it could happen to anybody. But this is how he processed it. This is how it, came out of him through all the bands that he loved to listen to, the stories that he wrote himself, and the things that he's witnessed and experienced in life all came together into the first comic of The Crow. So from there, it's been adapted and things have been changed up. Like I said, in the movie, they're targeted, and this one, the upcoming version, again, they're targeted because of what Shelley has knowledge of and witness of. So it's a little bit different, but they're trying to get to the point where, like, oh, this could be a new start for the franchise, or the characters, I should say. So we'll see. I have to figure out. There was somebody who was saying that Omar didn't like the angle of them being evicted in the apartment in the first one,
Mm-hmm.
but felt better about it when Eric didn't know that was the reason. Because when he happens upon the gang and Shelley, he has no clue. All he knows is his fiance is being assaulted. And that's when, T-Bird throws the knife. They beat him up. Fun Boy takes him out with a gunshot, and then they throw him out of the window. So he never knew that T-Bird and the gang were there to try to force them to sign papers. I argue against that point only because later in the film, when he meets with Officer Albrecht actually describes how she passed and what happened to her, and he gets to witness it by seeing it through his mind. But then he also describes that, look, nobody would talk about what happened to you guys, especially after what went down. Like, nobody was going to come forward and say, "Oh no, I saw this," or "I heard that." Like, everybody in that neighborhood was terrified.
Yep.
So I was like, okay, he does learn the how and why. So that kind of eliminates the ignorance that he had, character-wise, at the very least. But I don't know. Those are like little story points that you can get nitpicky about, depending. But again, it's Omar's story, so he can get nitpicky all the fuck he wants.
Mm-hmm.
If it's going to be adapted, I mean, yes, again, he's going to cash the check. Let's not say he's not going to, but he can say, I like this, I didn't like that, whatever the case was. I would love to hear what he has to say about it after it's been screened, after it's been released, and how, moviegoers and fans react to it. So it's not an easy one. This is one of those definite things where, like, a cult classic being remade or being brought back, and people are like, the original one was better. I know for the longest time, like, another good one is John Carpenter, Big Trouble in Little China.
Yes.
For the longest time, they were talking about making either a follow-up to it or remaking it. And there's always been that debate of, well, you should just do a sequel instead of trying to remake it because the original one's awesome. You don't have to touch that one. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know of many films that you wouldn't redo or you wouldn't go back and revisit. So it seems like nowadays, especially for executives and studios and whatever the case is, nothing is sacred. If they revisit any kind of IP, especially if it's something that's popular, they absolutely will.
Mm-hmm.
So, look, there's a new Ghostbusters coming out in a couple weeks. There's, well, you can't even talk about like the superhero movies because those always get revisited in some shape or form. There's a new Batman for every generation at this point. So,
yeah,
eventually things will get brought back out of storage, out of mothballs, out of whatever the case is, and you'll see another version of your favorite character that you thought was long gone. And suddenly, hey, we're at this again. And we're back at the debate. Is it a reboot? Is it a remake? Should you do it? Shouldn't you do it? It's, again, nothing sacred. Nothing is untouchable. There's a reason why Lord of the Rings was another one that is being brought back in another shape or form. They're redoing the TV series. I believe it's on Amazon. And people are like, oh, why are you going back to Lord of the Rings? Well, there's a lot more story to tell. You can do a straight up reboot or remake of the films if you want. I mean, technology has gotten better, so you can probably have better images or better display on the screen. But so long as it's out there, it's fair game. Let's face it.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's a movie that you think shouldn't be remade but probably will be?
This is the kind of question I usually have like 5 answers for, but of course you're putting me on the spot, so I can't think of a goddamn thing. I'm gonna go with Apocalypse Now.
Ooh, that's a good one. Okay.
But I mean, it's one of those things where is Apocalypse Now is really just they just took Heart of Darkness and they reworked it for Vietnam. So I guess theoretically, if you took the Heart of Darkness source material and you just reworked it for something more modern, I guess it could work for that. But Apocalypse Now, like especially like any of those period war films.
Yeah.
I mean, those really capture that its own energy, its own time, its own place, its own cultural zeitgeist. So those are one of those tough ones. I mean, you can even say the same thing for like a Full Metal Jacket or Platoon or Hamburger Hill or yeah, all of those Vietnam movies. They all have this very special, distinct feeling to them, and I don't think you can. I don't think that can be replicated, but I'm sure somebody at some point in time will try.
See, I like where you went with the war movies because those are very specific. I was more gonna say like along the lines of like Jaws. Like we've seen other pop culture movies remade, and they've had varying degrees of success, especially in the horror genre. You know, we've had a new Halloween, we've had a new Nightmare on Elm Street, we've had a newer Friday the 13th, even Texas Chainsaw Massacre, have all had newer entries or newer versions of them made. But people are like, oh, this didn't live up to that, or whatever the case was. Because, it's interpreted differently for different generations and different times. So those are hard to stick to it sometimes. But for films like Platoon and Apocalypse Now, yeah, those are very specific. Yeah, in some cases you would have to modernize it if you don't want to do straight retellings of those stories. So you can take the different story points and try to build a new story out of them. But I mean, those are specific. Like you have that time period in your mind when you watch it, especially if you're familiar with the older versions. So you kind of go right back to that. Like with The Crow, as soon as they started talking about the remake, immediately I was going back to like the scenes where Draven's in the car with T-Bird and he's got the gun to his head and they're speeding down the streets of Detroit, and Skank's trying to catch up to them in a little foreign car, because that claustrophobia, like no matter how fast they're going, they can't outrun the city itself, the confines. So you just feel like I'm right back in that weird, dark, wet city. So with that, yeah, same thing with the films that you mentioned. You can go back to that jungle setting, or you can go back to those war settings, and you're there. And it's like, again, because you've watched the films probably a number of times, it's very familiar to you. So you're like, oh, I feel like I'm right back to where I was when I watched this one, or whatever the case is. So, yeah, I would love to figure out what could be done down the line, but like I said, nothing's untouchable. So what you might think is sacred, can and probably will be remade. I know one for our friend of the show, Kelly, who's probably listening. Hi, Kelly.
Hi, Kelly.
She loves The Princess Bride.
Ah, yes.
And that's a beloved story, a beloved movie, and it's a fantastic film. But it's only a matter of time before somebody says, hey, I think I have a new angle or a new entry point to The Princess Bride. And then they'll go from there and a new iteration will be born. And the interviews will be done with the old cast and the old, crew, and say, what do you think about this? And what do you think about that? And, old stories of Andre the Giant on set will start coming back up again. Those are all fun. So who knows? The one Andre the Giant story that I love is when he's on set and apparently he's not looking so well. And the director looks over and goes, hey, Andre, everything all right? And then Andre just lets out like this monster of a fart. It's just gas escapes his body. And once he's done, he just looks over, gives a thumbs up, goes, I am now, boss.
I think my favorite Andre story from Princess Bride is they were filming something at night, and her name escapes me, but the woman who played Buttercup, she was getting cold. So Andre just basically put his hand on her head, and his fucking hand was so big, it basically acted as a hat for her. Because it was, I mean, there are plenty of stories about Andre being a motherfucker and Andre fucking with people and all kinds of stuff like that. But some of the stories like that, where he's just like being, just being a nice guy, it's just kind of heartwarming.
Yeah, those are the feel good stories.
Yeah, and I know he wasn't a perfect guy, and don't put people on pedestals and anything like that, because he had his own share of problems like everyone else did. But
yes.
Yeah, when you hear the stories like that, I always like, or the fact that like whenever they were in the same town, because they kind of struck up a friendship on the set. Him and Carrie Ellis would always get together and go out and have a drink and just catch up. And it just seems like a nice thing just to see the two of them together, just like talking, like, hey, what have you been working on? And hey, what have you been up to? And stuff like that. And it is sad to me, though, at that point in time. I know one of the reasons he was so gassy was, I believe at that point, Andre was day, not because he enjoyed it, but because his body was in so much pain.
Say that one more time.
I know at that point in time, it was kind of sad that Andre was drinking out of pleasure, but because he was in pain.
Yes. The Princess Bride Buttercup, Robin Wright.
Thank you.
For those playing at home.
I always struggle to remember her name and the guy who plays Vizzini.
Wallace Shawn.
Really?
I have IMDb open right now.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, damn, man, you were on point tonight. Never mind.
I'm good. I'm not that good. I know a lot about The Crow. I can probably rattle off a bunch of different things, but IMDb is a great source. Like I said, I was looking at it earlier tonight after I watched the trailer, and I was like, what are we going to talk about tonight? Well, the trailer's out, so might as well go over some history and story about that. So, it's very interesting. Andre is a great fucking, again, not putting him on a pedestal, but just the life he led and the stories that have come out from his life. There was that one documentary that was released a few years back on Andre the Giant overall, and you get to hear the stories. Him hanging out with, Arnold Schwarzenegger, being involved in wrestling, being involved in Hollywood and different things like that. So yeah, just very, very individual character and life that he led. So we'll see what happens. But there's a bunch of other films that I just think, you could go back and revisit some of these stories, because some of these stories can and will be timeless, depending on the themes that are, ultimately at the foundation of them. Somebody had brought up in this, because this was like online, I was looking at different discussions, and somebody says, how long will it take before they remake Schindler's List? And
that's, I think, a bridge too far.
That is, you say that, but as we get further and further from the, that point in time where the events actually happened, there's gonna have to be a retelling of that story for another generation. And there will be some studio, or there will be some movie maker who goes, hey, look, Spielberg did it back in the day, but it's been 30, 40, 50 years. Why not do it again? I'm just saying that, again, that's another example of how the studios will say, hey, let's go back and revisit this because we can. It's never the question of should we. It's we can do this. Why not? And from there, the ball starts rolling, pre-production starts going, people get involved, and then, it's not going to be, Schindler's List 2. Not at all.
Yeah. It would.
The back half of the list.
It would have to be, Jesus Christ. It would have to be, and you know what? I'm fine with, it's really sad. We've gotten to the point, unfortunately, where, every year more and more World War II veterans pass away.
Yes.
We're going to get to the point sooner or later where the last known World War II vets are going to leave this world. It's been, useless side note, 2011, the last World War I veterans died.
Wow.
A guy by the name of Frank Buckles was the last known American World War I veteran, and a fellow in Europe whose name I can't recall was the last known European veteran of the war. But yeah, they're dwindling fast. So one day we're going to get to the point where they're all gone, unfortunately. In fact, actually, there's been a big push in years for as many of them to sit down and tell their stories and have them recorded, just for the sake of, it's like, we need to capture this for posterity. If you ever find yourself in Washington, D.C., the U.S. Holocaust Museum down there, they've recorded an awful lot of them. It's a wonderful museum, but yeah, that's the kind of place you leave, and then it's you might want to chase that trip with a bottle of whiskey, because that's fuck.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. Absolutely.
But it's one of those situations where it's like, these are the things, unfortunately, where the more people forget what happened in that time period, that inches us closer to it happening again.
Yes.
And that's one of the things that scares me in this world.
Well, with that in mind, then I could say yes. A lot of these old stories, especially if they're, related to events in history, can be remade and retold. If nothing else, just as a slight reminder of what came before, and let's not try to go back to that.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, it's not Schindler's List 2, but a retelling or a remake of Schindler's List from, different angles, or at the very least, different story points, to give you a broader perspective of what went down back then and how everything came about for this story to be told in history, then I could see that being the case. But the problem is, a movie studio wouldn't look at it that way. A movie studio is looking at it, hey, let's remake this so we can print more money. So, or at the very least, I'm just being, jaded as far as Hollywood's concerned in that respect. I would love to think that there's somebody out there who's responsible enough to say, hey, let's retell this story from World War II. Hey, let's retell this story from World War I at the very least. So we can have that story continue to be, in the populace's mind, globally, as far as what happened. Yeah. So we don't fall back into that. But the way things move nowadays, new content always comes out, and there's something always to replace it the next week. So if you don't hit your window as far as your release and getting the eyes of people, buying tickets, whatever the case is, then you have a very good shot of just being lost in the shuffle as far as all the new things that are coming out. It has to be like a big film, like Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer is a good example of something that everybody knows more or less what happened. Like they know the broad strokes, but now being able to hear the storied version of it and how the bomb came to be and how, Oppenheimer was involved and all the other players that were involved as well and how that came to pass. I think it was the right time for that story to be told. How long will it be until somebody else decides, hey, I have a take on it. Maybe I can give a different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, along those lines, I think a remake would be necessary. Is a helpful tool for all of us. But when it comes to IP, like characters and comic books and stories, that's a little bit different because they're just milking it for what it's worth. Like, I don't think, and I love Batman, don't get me wrong, but I don't think we need as many iterations of Batman as there are. Because that's just like, how can we do this and how can we do that? And what if he, had a brother? What if he had like, another, not orphan, but, God, what do you refer to him as?
Award?
Thank you. That was the word I was looking for. Stuff like that. Like that's all how you could differentiate the story. But sometimes I think you're downgrading the overall story the more and more you do different iterations of it. So, but that's my 2 cents. I think we're there, sir.
We're a little bit more than there, my good man.
I do have one final thing to add because I know at the very end I usually ask you. Tonight is apparently a special night in Rabblecast history.
It is?
Well, special in regards that I was looking through Facebook earlier and I came across a post from Jimmy from 7 years ago.
Okay.
And Jimmy was talking about how, he normally doesn't talk about how he's involved with the show because he really doesn't do much with it. But he did refer to the fact that, he's got gear, he wants to help out, and it's just a fun time to sit down and talk. And he says how you and I were essentially like the bones of the show. So he just, chimes in every now and then with a comment. But the reason I say that is because he also had mentioned that it was the 35th entry into Horrible Events in History that you had done on that show 7 years ago. Do you remember what that entry was?
Off the top of my head, no. But I can tell you this. I do have a log of all of them.
I knew you do.
I'm actually adding words in because I'm stalling as I walk into my bed.
Uh-oh. He's going to the archives. He's walking into the vault.
Yeah, so I can go in here and let's see. So that would have been 7 years ago. That would have been March of 2017.
Correct.
So that would have been the story of Eliza Lamb.
Correct. Your record keeping is very astounding.
That would have been on episode 485.
Yes. Look how far we've come.
Well, how about that?
So there you go. That was around the time period where we would hang out in the studio, and every now and then we'd turn off the lights and just have a nice dark atmosphere with very little light going on. So,
That was at the point we were recording at. I think we were recording in the spare room.
was that the spare room or was that the studio that you guys had?
The studio, no. The studio shut down in either January or February of 2017.
Okay. Yes.
Because then we were working out of that tiny room next to the bathroom for a little while, and then we shut down. And then basically the podcast, we kind of put it on hold for a couple of months while we changed houses and all the other crazy shit happened.
Yep. Yeah, no, I thought it was really interesting. It's one of the beneficial things of Facebook when they say this day in history or memories to look back on. So, Jimmy, if you're listening, we love you. It was great to get a nice little memory of you through social media, and I hope you're listening. So,
yep.
But like we said before, I do believe we are there. How do you feel, sir?
Tired.
All right. And with that being said, if you made it this far, thank you for listening. My name is Eric Hernandez.
I'm Doug.
And we are the Rabblecast. Fucking train horn.
I was about to say, was that a train on your side or mine?
No, it's my side. All right, we're done.